cried. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel we post writing tips, book reviews, book hauls, unboxings and the occasional vlog. And today is a book review for you guys. I've kind of lost count of how many books I've read now. Is it 9, 10? Who knows? It's another book review, and this time it is another one that was lent to me by Jazz over at Panda Reads. If you haven't seen her page, check it out. The link is below this video. And the book I'm reviewing today is Moonrise by Sarah Crossan. This book is so sad, guys. If you've seen my book swap, which I did with Jazz, the link's above me if you haven't, I nearly cried whilst reading the blurb of this book, let alone actually reading it. Jazz hyped this book up to me so much, and I'm pleased to say it lived up to what she said it was. So I'll read you guys the blurb and then we'll go into what it's about. Joe hasn't seen his brother for 10 years, and it's for the most brutal of reasons. Ed is on death row. But now Ed's execution date has been set, and Joe is determined to spend those last weeks with him, no matter what other people think. From award-winning author Sarah Crossan, this poignant, stirring, huge-hearted novel asks big questions. What value do you place on life? What can you forgive? And just how do you say goodbye? Seriously, it is such a good read. It's all written in prose, so it's actually really short. If you look at these pages, it doesn't take you long to read. I think it took me 3 days, and that's because I'm a slow reader. From a writing perspective, the fact that it's written in prose is really interesting and unique, and it's basically really brutal, which I think adds to the brutal content of the story. It's about someone whose brother is on death row, which is a pretty brutal, horrible thing to go through. So the choice of using prose to describe that is, in my opinion, really, really good. And it also means you only get what Sarah Crossan has thought important. So the details you're given are minute, but they tell you everything you need to know, and you get such a vivid picture of where they are and what's going on and how each character feels. It's just so good. It's so well written. Another thing I found really interesting when I read this book is the insight it gives to people in various different parts of their lives and different economic backgrounds. So for example, on page 117, Nell gives Joe some money for a pizza, but he doesn't just spend it on pizza. The change he spends on a scratch card. He at this point has no money at all, like just nothing. And it's a really interesting thing to read, and also a big insight into what happens when you are that skint, basically, because you always think that people are fritting money away, but it's actually desperation and hope that makes someone spend money in this way. He's spending this tiny amount of money that he has on a scratch card in the hope that that one card could make a difference and change his life, because there's nothing he can do short term or even possibly long term in his current situation to get the funds he needs to survive. There's just nothing he can change, nothing he can do. There's no other jobs he can do. He can't get money from anywhere else. So he spends that small amount on a scratch card in the hope that it can solve his problem. It's really telling and just interesting, because you can see that happen, and I'm sure people have been through this. I mean, the skintier you are sometimes, the more you will spend. Another intriguing thing is the story isn't always linear. You have to read the titles, and it jumps from the current happening with Joe waiting for his brother in prison, and the past and what their mother was like and things like that. I don't want to give too much away because this is the spoiler-free zone, but because you jump around, the characters become clearer and clearer in your head as the story goes on. Spoiler alert. We're now going to go into the spoiler section, so if you haven't read this book, or if you don't want to hear any more details, then skip to this time here, where I will give my overall view and marks out of 10. If you have read the book and want to hear more detail, or if you haven't read it and just you're happy to hear more about it, then stay tuned. Spoiler alert. Alright guys, it's spoiler time. Page 139. The sibling love in this book is so sweet that Angela and Ed worked so hard just to get Joe a Christmas present. It's just and at this point as well, I'd like to say it doesn't sound like Ed is guilty. So we know he's on death row, but when you're hearing about his childhood and everything, he doesn't sound guilty. It doesn't sound like he could have killed someone. He just sounds so sweet and, yeah, troubled. Shoplifts. Got a bit of a problem, but that's understandable considering the mom is actually an absolute bitch. The mom is just horrible. She's so awful to these children and just abandons them. And it's no wonder that Ed is stealing things and just trying to make his siblings happy and look after them in the only way he knows how, and the only way a young child really can. On page 147, you see the first glimpse of Ed sort of losing it. So he misses his spot in the shower queue, and so he punches a wall. This is the first sort of sign that maybe he struggles to control his anger, which again is not a surprise with the upbringing that he's had. To me, it still doesn't make me think he's guilty, but it shows how it could be harder for him to come across as innocent when he needs to, because if he gets riled up, he can look aggressive. Page 204. The biggest spoiler ever, guys. So again, I will repeat, go to this time here if you don't want to hear the spoilers. Page 204, execution. It hits hard, and I'm in England, so we don't have capital punishment. You aren't killed here for your crime. If you do something really bad, you're sent to prison for life perhaps, but you won't be killed. And the reason that was changed here is because graveyards have so many people in who were later found innocent, but they'd already been hung. It didn't matter if they were innocent or not, they were found guilty, and courts can get it wrong and things can be biased. And yes, I know sometimes you can 100% prove that someone did something very bad, but on the off chance that you can't, or that something's been skewed, is it really worth killing someone? It's so sad. And this whole book leading up to this point, I cried so bad. On page 369 there was a quote, and it is when Joe is asked a question after Ed's execution from a guy who's clearing up from the protesters there, and he basically asks Joe, you know, what did he do? So why was he killed? Joe responds, does it really matter what he did? It's so heart-wrenching because it doesn't matter what he did. He's dead. That's the ultimate thing. It doesn't really matter what's happened now. All that matters is Ed is dead, and to Joe, that's his brother, and no one knew if he was guilty or innocent all the way through. It sounds to me like he's innocent and that he's been wrangled by these cops to become guilty when he had no choice and was held basically captive in a police cell. What else would you do when you're so exhausted and hungry and thirsty and you just want to go home? You think that the people of authority would help you, but obviously in this book they didn't, and you never find out who was guilty. You just know that Ed was found guilty and then killed. We don't know. Ultimately, I would definitely recommend reading this book. As I said, it took me 3 days to read it whilst at work and everything. It's not a big read. It looks chunky. It's not that chunky. It's written in prose. It will not take you long. But be warned, you will cry and you will feel ashamed maybe. Just so many emotions when you read this book. It really just makes you think about humanity as a whole and just what are we doing a lot of the time. For me, it really highlighted everything about life, death, poverty, and humanity ultimately. Thank you so much, Jazz over at Red Panda Reads, for lending me this book. I do definitely want to read more Sarah Crossan now, so you've made another fan. And I would give this book 10 out of 10 stars because it is written very, very well. The plot is very good. The characterization, you know the characters very, very well in so little words, and you definitely can envision the world around them as well. The minute details that Sarah Crossan has chosen to give you is definitely enough to get the point across, and as a writer definitely need to learn from this of it's actually what you don't describe that makes the book. And that is it for my review on Moonrise by Sarah Crossan. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to see it as soon as I upload, click that little bell down below. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Tumblr. I post my bookish pictures as well as my writing tips and unboxings on there. And thanks for watching, guys. Bye!